even though we have problems and conflicts with multiple nations, we still don't necessarily want to push them into each other's arms. Again, the Soviet Union and China during the Cold War being the key example. I mean, this principle of geopolitics goes back thousands of years to the Romans, right? Divide et impera, divide and rule. You do not want to unite your enemies. And what we've done here is we keep pushing them together. You know, China and Russia historically have not been friends. They share long borders together. Neighbors generally have problems with each other. These are nations with serious conflicts or differences of interest. And we've made it really easy for China to turn Russia into the junior partner in that relationship.
The Russia-Ukraine war rages on into its 6th month. Much like every other war, there have been lots of horrific stories of outright murder, rape, massacres, and other horrific war crimes. But the impact of this brutal war extends beyond the borders of both nations. The war has now reshaped international energy costs on a global basis, helped create massive global food shortages, and helped trigger a nasty rise in annual global inflation. In addition, nations are reassessing their priorities in political and trade relations with other countries. To say this has been a rude awakening for several nations will be a gross understatement. For instance, the United States seems to be losing ally after ally to Russia, a situation that threatens its already shaken economy. While President Joe Biden's visit to Saudi Arabia turned out to be a huge mockery of America's position as the world's superpower, the country is now in talks to receive the yuan instead of dollars for oil sales. In addition, China's relations with Russia seem to be strengthening by the day. Alone, these are formidable forces, but together, the impact could be staggering for the United States, which in all honesty has a lot to gain if these countries remain apart and more to lose if they form a union. Regardless of the intent, the U.S. is going to see this newly formed bond between China, Russia, and Saudi Arabia as a threat to its dominance. In a recent episode of the All In podcast, David Friedberg, David Sachs, and Chamath Palihapitiya discussed the change in relations between these giants, the effects on the United States, and how the U.S. might have driven these 3 countries into each other's arms. Please watch, like, and share this video. Also, ensure you drop your comments and observations in the comment section below and subscribe for more videos like this. Thanks and enjoy the video. Let's dive right in.
I want to bring together a couple of threads and get your guys' take on, all of these things kind of coming together and what it means for foreign policy and how things might play out on the global stage in the next, call it years to decades. Xi Jinping, it's been reported this week, is taking a trip to Saudi Arabia. This is just a few weeks after Joe Biden made his trip to Saudi Arabia. I'll read just an excerpt. He's going to end his more than 2 years of self-imposed in-person diplomatic isolation, and his first trip is going to be to Saudi Arabia. This is from unnamed Saudi sources, so it's unclear. This isn't an official statement. This is just reporting. The Wall Street Journal reported in March that after 6 years of negotiations, China and Saudi Arabia are getting close for China to start paying yuan for oil that they would be buying from the Saudis. So there's an important kind of economic tie-up that may be emerging that could affect the U.S. dollar and the importance of the U.S. dollar on the global economic stage. And meanwhile, this week as well, it's been reported that China is doing military exercises with Russia inside Russia. So there is an extension of China and their influence and their economic tie-ups and their military activity with both with both Russia and Saudi. I also want to highlight another important point that came out this week. Saudi Aramco reported their earnings. The largest earnings ever for a company. $48 billion of net profit in a quarter. That is more profit than Microsoft, Apple, Facebook, and Tesla combined in a single quarter. It is the most profitable business. And Saudis have been very public about their intention of divesting their interest in Saudi Aramco, which is their state-owned and state-run oil company, and moving into other businesses. Over the past couple of months, it's been reported that they've accumulated a nearly $100 billion equity portfolio, owning stocks like Alphabet, Zoom, Microsoft, and others. It's also been reported that they own over $160 billion of US treasuries. So the US is very dependent in the private equity community, in the VC community, and in the public markets on Saudi dollars. Saudis have been large holders of US dollars. And now through China, it looks like the Saudis may be having a tie-up that brings them closer to China through this trade relationship with the yuan and the visit from Xi Jinping. while China is actively exercising, their military inside of Russia. Is the future a China, Russia, Saudi axis? And should we be concerned and should we be changing any of our tactics on foreign policy, David Sachs, as this set of threads plays out over the next couple of months and going ahead?
Yes, I think we do need to make some changes. Biden's backing away from this now, but in his first year, he declared the Saudis to be pariahs, and he did push them into China's arms. What was the point of that? Biden recently had to go to the Middle East to basically beg Saudi Arabia to increase their production of oil. So he's already acknowledged that the policy didn't work. And one of the reasons it didn't work is because simultaneously with declaring these allies to be enemies, he basically restricted U.S. energy production, which is, strategically undermined.
And the U.S. has military bases in Saudi Arabia, very strategic assets for the U.S. military.
Yeah, listen.
And we sell them weapons.
The U.S. relationship with Saudi Arabia is always going to be complex. They're a complicated friend to have, but it's much better to have them as a friend than basically drive them into China's arms. And the reality is, whatever you think about the regime there and how oppressive it is, first of all, we don't get to choose the people running these countries. That's the lesson we should have learned over and over again from all these failed regime change operations. Second, do we have any reason to believe that if that regime got toppled, it would get replaced with something better? I think we all know that if the regime there fell, it would probably be replaced with something fundamentalist that we would like even less. And certainly if another nation were to basically dominate the region, like Iran, that would be worse for us as well. So our relationship with them is complicated, but ultimately they should be, I think, allies of the United States, and we should not be working overtime to push them into China's arms. And I think similarly with Russia, we've basically declared ourselves to be engaged in this proxy war with Russia, which strategically, there's just nothing in it for us.
As of early August, the U.S. government had announced a whopping $9 billion in military aid to Ukraine, or $50 billion overall. But many, like David Sachs here, are questioning why we are so deeply involved in a war that does not directly involve us, and one that would no doubt result in a lot of strategic losses. This article from The National Interest, an American bi-monthly international relations magazine, perfectly captures the situation. With the bold title, "No Matter Who Wins Ukraine, America Has Already Lost," the article talks about the strategic losses the United States faces as a result of the war. Here is an excerpt. Regardless of who wins the Ukrainian war, the United States will be the strategic loser. Russia will build closer relations with China and other countries on the Eurasian continent, including India, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the Gulf states. It will turn irrevocably away from European democracies in Washington. Just as President Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger played the China card to isolate the Soviet Union during the Cold War, Presidents Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping will play their cards in a bid to contain U.S. global leadership. Let us know what you think about the United States' involvement in the Ukraine war as Canadian venture capitalist Chamath Palihapitiya gives his opinion about the new bond between China, Russia, and Saudi Arabia.
You can sympathize with the people of Ukraine all you want, but it's dangerous.
You've said that in the past. I think the question is, does this China military exercise in Russia indicate an escalation of our conflict with China to you? Or is this something that, is just kind of par for the course in terms of, neighbors, conducting.
Mearsheimer just had an article in Foreign Affairs talking about the Ukraine war, reminding us that it's still going on. I think people somehow think that this war is just stable and it'll settle into forever war status, kind of like Afghanistan, these conflicts in the Middle East that just went on forever. It's actually very dangerous. It could always escalate out of control. And as long as it's going on, I think we just have to remember that it's going on. It poses a huge global risk.
I think it's really dramatic to kind of paint it in these stark kind of like bipolar terms. I think we are post all of that. So I understand how in the Cold War, it was easy to fall into binary definitions of good and evil, 1 and 0, us versus them, team A versus team B. But in 2022, I don't think that's how things work anymore. We're in a highly interconnected, highly global world. It's very complicated. Dollar flows are real time. They're massive. Cooperation is real time. It's all over the world. It's with every country. So it allows every country actually the first chance that they've ever really had to maximize their own potential for their own citizens. And that's really what every country's goal is, right? Mm-hmm. And so in that lens, look what just happened today. Gazprom said they're going to shut off Nord Stream 1 just for, a few days, right? But as a result of that, EU nat gas has just gone absolutely nuclear and just closed at all-time highs.
14x where it was pandemic.
Right.
Price per unit for year ahead.
So if you take a step back, we are at max energy production with all of the capacity all around the world, 100 plus odd million barrels a day. Okay, global productivity absorbs that. There is very little room right now to expand that without pushing the date in which that capacity is available out until 2028 to 2030. So effectively a decade from now. So if you're in this situation and you're a country with vast natural resources, of which I'll just remind us America is one, I think the most important thing you can do for your own citizens is to monetize these petrochemicals now. Get it out of the ground in a reasonable way. Sell them in the marketplace because there's demand for it. Take that money and reinvest it in your people. And I think if you look at it that way, the best run countries are responding to this moment in time like any company would. How do you maximize demand and sell the product you have to the most number of customers globally? And so I think the Middle East is doing an incredible job. The US, by the way, by passing the IRA, finally, I think, is on the right footing, because we can talk about this in a moment, but the path to permitting and the path to clean up. And by the way, it puts fossil fuels on a level playing field with clean energy alternatives.
Emerging alternatives, yeah.
The best thing that could have happened, okay? So I think we're all behaving in a very rational, market-focused way. And so I would focus less on trying to dramatically kind of resolve these things as a few countries versus everybody else. I don't think that's what's happening.
Yeah, now, much more complex.
Much more complicated than that. But I think the simple explanation is people with resources in the ground of the country in which they rule have a responsibility, if they believe that there's market demand, to absorb that so that they can take the revenue that comes from it and reinvest it in their people. That is true for the United States. It's true for Saudi Arabia. It's true for every country in the world.
Yeah, Saudi Arabia is clearly making these investments, right? Not just on
and by the way,
energy, but also housing and new industry and education.
And then what do you do with that much money?
Saudi Arabia is becoming much more liberal as a result too, right? The education standards, yeah.
And if you look at the investment, you didn't need to go to Dave Swenson and understand portfolio allocation, although I think the guys in Saudi are smart enough to have probably done it. But if you have a lot of money coming from one kind of business, and you need to make sure that you can diversify so that you can reinvest over a long period of time. If you look at countries that had huge petrochemical related revenue flows, the Nordics, what did they do? They stood up these huge sovereign wealth funds, and those sovereign wealth funds went abroad and they bought all kinds of non-correlated assets to those petrochemicals. That is the same thing that Saudi is doing now.
Financial security for their people.
But it's like, what is the furthest uncorrelated asset from oil? It turns out it's Apple, Facebook, Meta, and Google.
Do you agree with Chamath that these countries are not out to oust the United States, just doing what's best for their respective countries? Or do you see a scenario where both points are not necessarily mutually exclusive? Please let us know what you think in the comments section below. Also, ensure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you never miss any of our videos. Thanks for taking the time to watch our videos and support our channel. We are 150,000 subscribers strong, and none of this could have happened without your support. We deeply appreciate all our new and existing subscribers and viewers. Thanks for the continued support.